I'm Steve Smith at Church Equippers. In a recent seminar that I was doing on church systems, I was telling a little bit of my history. The very first church I went to, straight out of my training, was in a small town in Wisconsin, and the town was less than 2,000 people. What I discovered when I got there was that the church already had a reputation in the community. As I went out and visited people who had visited the church before I arrived, but had not come back, I went to one house, and as I introduced myself, the husband, who was in another room, yelled in, "Hey, is that the pastor of Amway Church?" I said, "What? Tell me the story." And they explained that they had visited the church looking to build relationships with people, and the only thing they ever got invited to was an Amway presentation. I began to look at my church through new eyes and recognized that almost everybody in the church were involved in Amway. And this was a problem. And as I shared this with the group of pastors, one of them asked me, "What did you do to change that?" I said, "It only took me 18 months, but it started with, number one, prayer. It also involved building relationships with the key people." A lot of times when churches are doing what we don't want them to do, whether they're new churches or established churches, we get angry. We get in their face. We said, "Stop that. Draw the line in the sand and say, look, you can't do this anymore, or you're out," and they go out. I found that that wasn't the strategy that was going to help me in this situation. The church was only 50 people to start with at that point. And so I needed to build relationships with key people and love them. I needed to preach the gospel and begin to fill their minds with the glory of God, that there is something greater God's called us to than even Amway, because Amway had taken over the church. They were talking about it in Sunday school. They were exchanging things in the building. But they weren't talking about Jesus and the gospel and lost people. So I began to preach the gospel and fill their mind with the glory of God. And I also found that there was a point in which I could say to one of the people who called me up and invited me into an Amway presentation, I just couldn't do that. I couldn't look at people as potential customers and potential disciples at the same time. That I was called to be a pastor and make disciples for Jesus Christ. That really dumbfounded him. And then I called the key person in the church and said, "You never guess what happened. Somebody tried to recruit me into Amway. You know what? I just don't have time to do that." And by doing this, I was letting them know that as a pastor, I was leading them in a different direction. I wasn't saying what they were doing was bad, because I knew economically they were doing this because financially they needed income. But I also recognized that it had taken over the soul of the church. And when you are in that kind of a situation, this is a systems problem. It's a theological problem. It's a relational problem. And you need to be patient. You need to make sure that the steps you take in dealing with this kind of a situation is flowing from a heart of love for the people and a heart that is dedicated to God's purposes for them and His glory, instead of becoming angry and short-tempered and chasing people off. In the end, Amway became something in the rearview mirror. People continued to sell Amway, but the church changed. And by the time I left that church 10 years later, it had lost the reputation for being Amway Church and was known in the town among people who didn't even attend as a compassionate church who cared about people. In your pursuit of bringing renewal and change to your group or leading your new church to its purpose, consider these steps, consider how you treat people and how you pursue your leadership, and it can make all the difference in the outcome of where that church ends up.